Go ahead.
Let me just get that onto the screen. We've not quite configured you yet. It would be much more beneficial if people could actually see what we're talking about as well.
That is true. I do have my screen share up.
No, it's a problem at my end. Hold on. Here it is.
Not a problem.
Right. We've got you now.
Okay. Still trying to get used to this brand new system here, so once I do see it on screen.
It's definitely on screen, don't worry about that.
Okay, let me adjust that over. There we go. Alright, starting off with the Signal 3 warnings, they are covering the Ilocos region, the Cordelia Administrative region, the Cagayan Valley region,
yep,
and the Central Luzon region. These are areas that are going to get hit the worst. Signal 2 warnings extend up to the northern part of Luzon, that's the Cordelia Administrative region, the northern Ilocos region, and the Cagayan Valley region to the north.
Okay, there we go.
Signal 2 warnings also extend down into the Central Luzon. This probably does also include the Manila area. Also, Signal 2 warnings also in the southern Quezon region of Calabazon. And Signal 1 warnings going into the Central Luzon region. This includes the area of Bataan, Metro Manila, Rizal, Laguna, Batangas, and Cavite. And extending even down into the Baikal region of Camarines Norte.
Just to
Those
confirm,
are all the current signal warnings in.
It is 2 o'clock in the Philippines. I don't know why the Pegasa clock is wrong on your page. That's very odd.
Let me do a quick refresh, see if that adjusts it. There we go, 2:04.
All right, then.
That's a little bit better.
If anyone's got any comments or questions for us whilst we're on the air this hour, and indeed we're probably going to be here until landfall now, because it is coming up, it would appear to be looming large in the next 2 hours if its current rate of movement continues. And that means,
which I believe the JWTC had it at 20 kilometers an hour movement, which that is, I believe, 10 or 15 miles per hour, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. 13 miles an hour, something like that.
13 miles per hour. So
we've been looking at those satellite images. Do you think the storm is strengthening at this time?
Well, that could be a little debated. I mean, I'll pull up the Himari 8 satellite that I was looking at before we went on air, and I was noting last night that there was 2 dry slots that developed in on the eastern side during around 11 or 12 o'clock Eastern time, and I'm looking at the Himari now. Those dry slots have been filled in with some convection, and a lot of convection has really started building in back around the center, so I would not be surprised if we're not seeing a re-intensifying system just before landfall.
Big flare up in those cloud tops. It's got a disjointed eye wall, but it seems to all be coming together at the same time.
I can actually let the Himari rock back and forth here a couple times, and you can really see over the last 45-50 minutes that dry slot's been pushed out. The eye is starting to get a little bit more defined, and the heaviest convection is starting to really expand on the southeast side. So this is definitely trying to get its act together.
As we thought it was possible because of better conditions around the storm at the minute.
Yeah, I was actually surprised looking at some of the upper troposphere shear maps, and we were looking at 20, almost 25 knots in some spots, but it seems to have actually held together under that shear and is really reorganizing itself.
Interesting. So this is pretty much a live look at the storm right now. This is Typhoon Yutu, and if we're going to put it on another contextual image here, let's see if we can go and get that now. Here we are. This is the 2 a.m. Philippine time position on the map, and you can see how close it is to land now. Something like 40 miles, 40. and you can see how the storm is in relation to the whole of the Philippines. It's tropical storm force wind field. How should I express this? We expect that it's going to extend as far south as the Polillo Islands, which are down here. So I'll mark that with that small black line there. And on the northern side, tropical storm force winds will probably be felt just along the northern periphery there of Luzon, just short of the Babayan Islands. And typhoon conditions will be felt along a much more narrower margin, something like that for the southern extent, and something like this for the northern extent. The typhoon conditions are usually in a very small area, especially compared to the tropical storm force wind field, which is pretty large. Still 150 nautical miles, I believe, in the northwestern quadrant.
Well, based on the swath you have there, Nathan, that puts the cities of Palanan and Dinapigu in the main swath of the typhoon force areas. Looks like the southern swath of the tropical storm force conditions could go as far south as Burdeos and all the way up to the Cagayan region, I believe, all the way up to the island of Camiguin Island. I know I probably mispronounced that. I apologize for that. But areas like Santa Ana and areas further south that got devastated by Mancut earlier this season are going to be going through another round, but thankfully they're going to be spared the worst of this, as it is going to their south.
Don has just asked for forecast rainfall for various provinces. They're all at the bottom of your screen right now, scrolling through. The maximum rainfall for some of these areas, particularly on the mountain ranges, so these areas here, there's one particular area, and the other area is round here. These areas could all receive in excess of 500 millimeters of rain in total from this storm. So we'll probably mark those in. How should we do this?
And those areas that you are marking, Nathan, those are areas that are not only under the Signal 3 warnings, but they also do have a severe general flood advisory for those areas as well, leading all the way down to the area of Aurora, Nueva Ecija, and Tarlac, all the way up to the northern Cordillera Administrative Region, up to the Mountain Province, Benguet, Apayo, and Abra. So those are some of the areas that are in that severe flooding zone, which are right in the middle of those Signal 3 warnings that we were discussing earlier.
Yeah, so in those areas it could be up to or exceeding 500 millimeters. In other locations, they're all at the bottom of the screen every time they go through all of those. But generally, I can't remember exactly what the numbers are, so I'm not going to put them on the map, but I believe it was something like 200 to 300 generally across the northern area of Luzon. A bit further south in the central area here, the Signal 2 warning zones, maybe 100 to 200, and south of there you're looking at 50 to 100. Those are all expressed in millimeters, of course. Conversion to inches is roughly 25 millimeters to an inch.
And that's not just counting the rainfall, Nathan. I'm looking at the storm surge forecast that Pagasa has put out. The coastline provinces of Isabela, La Union, and Paginisan are all calling for a 2 to 3 meter storm surge along the coastline.
Yeah. I'm surprised that's not a bit higher, actually.
Well, I do have the, I guess what would be Pagasa's equivalent to the inundation map on my screen, where it shows the 2 to 3 meters going down the eastern coastline, and then another 1 to 2 meters going further south.
Yeah, we're seeing that there. So it's pretty much the whole It looks like they correspond to the counties, the provinces rather. Looks like the whole of Isabella there is in the orange zone. What was that? 2.5? Is it 2?
2 to 3 meters, which once you translate that over to English standard units, you're looking at a possibly 6.5 to 9 foot storm surge, give or take.
And that's my phone. I'm not going to answer it. The yellow area is 1 to 2 meters, and that looks like the whole of Aurora province.
Yeah, going all the way down, and that's not just that's just the eastern coast. We still have the western coast as well.
Get rid of that phone.
That will also be affected by this
Yes.
once Yutu comes out on the other side. So just because if you're watching this on the western side, don't think that just because the storm's just making landfall on the eastern side of the from northern Luzon that you're out of the woods. You still have those northwesterly winds that are going to be coming onshore once Yutu comes through, and it's going to be pushing all that water right back into the coastline. So that's why you're seeing these 2 to 3 meter storm surge markers on the western side of northern Luzon.
And then further north you see those as well, all along that northwestern periphery there, and the winds could even get up there as well. Of course you're going to get gale force winds and possibly even gusts approaching typhoon status.
Absolutely. This actually kind of reminds me, and I know this is probably not a good correlation, but this reminds me of Florence when she came through the North Carolina area. Everybody was worried that she might be Cat 4, Cat 5, and made landfall as a Cat 1. Yutu's pretty much pulling almost the same page. It was a Cat 4, Cat 5 3 days ago, and now we're looking, I think the JWTC has it as 90 knots right now. So it's pulling almost the same thing as what Florence did as in the U.S. So definitely don't let your guard down. This is still a very dangerous storm, no matter what the winds are.
No, of course, I mean, hopefully people are taking it seriously, even though it is a much weaker storm. Let's not forget, this was once a Category 5.
Absolutely, and if this season has taught us anything, that the winds aren't necessarily the biggest threat. It is that surge, it is that rain, specifically as I've alluded to with Florence back in September. I made the argument with a lot of people in the Force 13 community that even though Florence had Category 1 winds, it still had the rainfall and the potential surge of a Category 4 system due to the eyewall replacement cycles and the storm expanding. This is very much the same scenario with Yutu. We had a Cat 5. It's expanded, had 2-3 eyewall replacement cycles. The winds have expanded, so if you're in northern Luzon, you're thinking, oh, this is just a Category 2 typhoon. No, treat it as if it was a 4 or a 5, because the rain potential is still there as if it was a 5, and the wave action is still there as if it was a 5. So definitely treat it worse than what it actually is in terms of the wind speed.
And of course those rainfall totals as well could cause some issues. Now, this storm, a lot of people of course will be comparing it to Mankut, and that'll be another reason why people may underestimate this storm, although this one has moved further south. So I would suggest that central and southern Luzon will have stronger effects from this storm than they did from Mankut. Maybe just a little bit.
Yeah, they would be. Mankut hit in the northern part of Luzon, well outside of where the storm surge markers are. This is actually well further south, down in the Cagayan Valley, so the northern part up near Santa Ana. And Mankut was a whole different kind of typhoon that we had seen. I'm not going to say it was on the scale of Haiyan, because that's just completely absurd. But Mankut was its own beast in and of itself. I hadn't seen a storm come through that area of that intensity since Haiyan. I'll be honest.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's only been 5 years, and the Philippines had one of its biggest typhoon droughts in its history in that amount of time. Indeed, Mankut was the first typhoon to hit the Philippines since Nok 10. That's the third, I think, maybe even the second longest gap between typhoons recorded in the Philippines, which is unbelievable. And now's another back to normal by the looks of things, and these typhoons do happen regularly. Although Mangkhut, in my opinion, would be most comparable probably to Meggy, at least for
Maggie
the
was a little bit
Philippine
before my
landfall.
time. I mean, I'll be honest, my knowledge
2010.
of the Westpac is a little bit
Alright.
limited, but I'm starting to get a little bit more
I was going to
into
say,
the
you've been
Westpac.
tracking storms as long as I've been born. I was worried about you not knowing Meggy. But yes, the
Well,
Westpac, you've just...
most of my knowledge base is more in the Atlantic. I've just started recently starting to get into the East Pac, the Central, and the West Pac, as I've actually been part of this community and actually have learned a lot more
Yeah.
from its members and from you, Nathan. So the
There's
West Pac is
there's a
definitely
lot of the
something
world out
I'm.
there to cover.
Oh yes, absolutely.
But I would compare Mangkhut to Meggy. I wouldn't compare this storm to Meggy at all. I'm not sure what I would compare this storm to, actually. Thinking, racking the brain
In
about
terms of,
some analogues. I'll see if I can find some. And I don't know if you want to take a look at some other warnings that are out there or anything.
let me see what else is on. I was trying to pull up the general flood advisories on Pagasa, but they're not being too cooperative for me at the moment. Let me see if I have any flood information here. Okay, here we go. Let's see here. Okay, looks like Pagasa has the flood advisory number 2 up for the Pampanga River Basin, issued at 5 p.m. local time. They're calling for 60 to 100 millimeters precipitation over the next 24 hours, it looks like. Which I believe that is... God, my conversions are a little off. I think that's
Pampanga.
2.5 to 4 inches.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. And that was in
And that's just in
Pampanga,
the-
so that was further south towards Manila.
Yeah, and that's down in the furthest. I think that's part of the Signal 1 warning area, but that's just one of them I was trying to pull up.
Alright, just looking at some analogues then. I can tell you that... just a minute. I'm trying to see if I can see the province of Isabela in particular. Alright. Only 2 Category 2 storms have ever made landfall in Isabela in the month of October. They were Elaine in 1974 and Nancy in 1954. A lot of stronger storms made landfall in Isabela that month. Nancy of 1982 was a Category 4. Nalgay of 2011 was a Category 4. And Zeb of 1998, of course, was a Category 5 when it moved through. So that's a little bit of perspective there, although the 2 best analogues are before good satellites, so I'm not sure what we can do with that information. But if you've got anything to say about any of those that we just mentioned and how you might want to compare this storm to those, then we're curious to hear. But if you've got any questions for us in general about this storm as it continues to approach landfall, send us a message. Start your message with Force 13 all in text, and we're here to serve. And we'll have some more information whenever it comes in. We're staying now until the storm makes landfall, even if it kills us. Or me. And, you know, it's a serious situation that we're
I'm actually not sure
undergoing.
if you looked at the Himari infrared in the last few minutes, Nathan. This is the infrared that I'm looking at is about 22 minutes old, but it looks like that dry slot that I discussed earlier is actually starting to entrench in and is actually starting to get into the northwestern part of the eye wall on this
Really?
latest infrared imagery that I'm looking at.
Alright, we're just getting the latest loaded here onto the page now. And this goes up to... It is half an hour old. I'm surprised it is that old.
Yeah, the Himari that I'm looking at is
But yeah, there's a gap.
17
There's always...
UTC.
There's always been a gap, and quite often there's been multiple gaps. Those latest frames there showing northwestern side looking flaky. Southern
It
side
actually
trying
almost
to
looks
make
like
up
that
for
dry
it.
slot is actually almost punched into that northwestern eye wall, or actually maybe into the eye itself. So that might be a bit of a saving grace.
No idea what just happened there, but here we are with that animation again. And you've got some as well, I believe.
Yeah, this is from 1759 on my screen from the Himari 8. And you can actually see that dry slot's the lighter greens.
Yeah, you got a slightly different, I think it's a different band that you're showing.
Yeah, I'm on band 13 on the RAM NB website, but you can see as I progress it forward, you can see those light greens, which is that dry air.
We were on band 14 on the other imagery, so that's why it looks different.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, you can see, and I'm actually gonna use a little bit of a mouse drawing here, but this is right in through there, and that that's where the dry air was at yesterday.
You picked the color yellow. That doesn't work so well.
Well, that's what the RAM MB has, unless I could change it. But you can actually see where that dry air is actually entrenched in, and actually
definitely, that's been a feature for days now. It's still going on.
Right, and it's come and gone over the last 48 hours from what I've been observing, and I thought maybe it had been flushed out, but it's still evident that dry slot's there, and you can see right there on the Himari 8 infrared that it's actually starting to penetrate into that northwestern eye wall.
We're now joined by Devon. Good afternoon.
Yep, good afternoon to everyone watching the stream. Of course, this would basically be a good, very early morning in the Philippines, if I recall correctly.
It is just about 2:25 local time there, Devin, just for your reference.
Yep.
They're exactly 12 hours behind me. So, well, it looks like that Yutu has had a flare of convection as of late, but other than that, absolutely nothing to show for it otherwise.
No, you're right, Devin. Actually, Nathan and I, we were discussing there was been a dry slot on the eastern side of the core the last 36 to 24 hours, and it actually looks like on the latest Himari imagery that dry slot is actually penetrated into the northern core of the storm, and it's actually starting to affect the northwestern eye wall and possibly getting into the eye itself.
Devon, do we have any idea how many eye walls this storm has had?
Clearly a lot. So, well, of course, this storm was forecast to move rather slowly, and it has been, though it does look like it is picking up the pace a little bit as of late. Not a lot, but a little bit.
Do you think that landfall is coming up in 2 hours or less?
It's what it looks like to me, something like an hour and a half, 2 hours. It shouldn't be taking very long from now. The eye is taking a look at the Pegasus site, 130 kilometers east-northeast of Casiguran, Aurora Province, and that was an hour and a half ago.
And this satellite imagery, something like 30 minutes old, showing that the storm, let me just get latest coordinates on that actually, as of that time, and see how much closer the storm has gotten in half an hour. Because half an hour ago, it was 41 miles from making landfall.
Yeah, so landfall is definitely coming in pretty close now.
So now it is 35 from landfall, so it's moved 6 in 30 minutes. And considering that's 30 minutes old, it's probably now down to 29 miles, you'd imagine.
Yep.
That actually means, if you extrapolate that, it's just over 2 hours.
And if it's only 29 miles offshore, that pretty much, if the center of the storm is only like 29, 30 35 miles-ish off the shore, that pretty much means that the worst of the storm is coming ashore right now in Luzon.
Areas like
Not
Dilisah,
many
Dina
areas there,
Peak,
thankfully.
and Palaran are probably getting tropical storm force conditions and upwards of gusts of typhoon force conditions probably at this time as this gets closer to shore.
And from what I see here with the JMA cone, looks like the storm's going to be in the South China Sea for a rather long period of time, basically moving nowhere between the 3 and 5 day time period. I don't know if that's just because of a low confidence forecast. That's what I would imagine that would mean. But the JMA cone does not take the storm very far over the next 5 days. That's for certain.
Yeah, so the place that will probably be the worst affected by the storm's winds is the small village of Palanan. It has got something like 17,000 is its population. A very secluded location, has its own airstrip though. Was also affected quite severely by Typhoon Meggy as well.
This storm, of course, absolutely nowhere close to the strength of Typhoon Meggy. Currently, the JMA, let me bring back the JMA information. They currently have the storm at 950 millibars, which that would roughly translate to about a category 3-ish, 115 miles an hour. And taking a look at it on satellite, I would be inclined to say more or less. I believe the JTWC has 105 miles an hour, but it's likely somewhere in that 105 to 115 mile an hour range as it's coming ashore right now.
Do you think... What do I think? I mean, what do you think about those rainfall totals? Up to 500 millimeters for some of those mountain areas.
That's not surprising to me at all. Obviously, the mountainous areas, you're going to have the mountains that creates uplift, plus the storm's not really going to be moving anywhere in the South China Sea. And that meandering, obviously, one of those outflow bands or inflow bands or whatever can end up very easily trekking over Luzon while it's stalling in the South China Sea, and that can cause even more rain.
Yes, actually the HWRF suggested that will exactly occur.
Yeah, and that's not really surprising for a storm that's expected to basically stall in the same place, at least after 3 days. Luckily, it's not going to stall over land at peak intensity. It's going to stall over water and hopefully peter out.
That is actually what the models are trending towards as well, isn't it? That's the official...
Yeah.
Not the official, but the JTWC forecast at the minute. And JMA, I'm not sure what they're saying.
Yeah, I have the JMA forecast right here, if it will allow me to pull it up.
I think Tim's showing that right now already.
Oh,
Yeah,
well,
I've had
there
it.
you go. Tim, no, that's just the 3-day cone.
Yeah, let me see if I can get the 5-day cone up there.
I got it right here already.
All right, go ahead.
Two of us showing the same thing. Yeah, there we go.
That just means great minds are
I
thinking alike.
got it up on full screen there, and you can see the 5-day cone, 24, 48, and then 72 hours to 120 hours, basically not moving much, and you can see the size of the cone. You've got a lot of China being encompassed there, the entire island of Taiwan. So there is a lot of uncertainty in the forecast, and you can see that here with what the spaghetti models are saying. And it's just a general cluster of where is this storm going after the 3-day mark. So very high uncertainty, to say the least, of where this storm's going to be.
This thing better not. You know how some of those models were showing it turning around, and can you imagine it going crazy like two of those other storms did in the South China Sea?
Yeah, well, here's what the median track is.
Wayne, wasn't it?
Yeah, there have been
That
some
won't
weird
happen,
South
don't worry,
China
that won't
Sea storms. This could end up being something like that, because you can
Oh.
see here's the
He's just told
median
me where.
track.
No, yeah,
It's
well,
just-
although
Oh.
by that late point there where it turns around, it will probably be a remnant.
Yeah, it'll be very weak at that point. One would hope, anyways, it would be very weak at that point. And you can see here is some intensity guidance. All models expecting a very sharp drop-off, except for the HWRF, which expects some re-intensification in the South China Sea.
And in
I
case
think
you were
that's likely
wondering,
going to be short-lived.
the
as you can see.
CHP6 model stands for fake news model.
Yes.
And that one should not be looked at. But the other ones you could probably half take. CTCX is usually the craziest out of them. But every so often is right. But it won't be this time.
Yep. But it seems like the most likely scenario is it's going to pass Luzon pretty much at its current intensity, drop off in intensity, maybe regain a little bit, going back up to Cat 1, maybe Cat 2, but I doubt it, as it moves back into the South China Sea, and then all models expecting
Devon,
a pretty rapid dissipation after that.
I'm just not sure that I buy the certainty that the storm will weaken to a TS over the Philippines.
It might not, but it is going to weaken. There's no doubt. It's going to weaken by a significant amount, to say the least.
Cloud top's really flaring up in the latest frames.
That's like the reason why the cloud tops are flaring up is because of the mountains over Luzon. That's part of that. That's part of that uplift.
The mountain's literally
No.
pushing the clouds higher?
Pretty much. That's exactly what's going on there. You'll see that very often. You saw that happening with Willa as that was making landfall. You also see that a lot with typhoons when they're hitting Taiwan. You'll usually see a big flare up of cloud tops before it ends up making landfall. It's pretty much the same thing. That's pretty typical of a storm making landfall in a mountainous area.
Although quite a lot of that flare up is out at sea in latest frames.
Yeah, but it originated on the western side and now it's wrapping around to the south.
Another look at that feature. And for all of that flare up in the south, in the north it's looking worse, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, the eye is not looking good, to say the least, to begin with.
Would appear to be
So,
open to the northwest, I'm sorry.
The core has looked pretty terrible with this storm for a very long time, which is a great thing, which is great news for the Philippines. The fact that this thing weakened from this absolutely monster Category 5, looking like it's going to be at least a Category 4 all the way up until landfall, and then the storm literally tore itself apart over the past 2 days, and it's been struggling, to say the least. And
Do you think it just, do you think it's just that it was too late in the year for the storm to continue?
Oh, the sea surface temperatures were there. There's no doubt about it. The conditions were there for it to keep its intensity, and it just didn't.
I was watching the sea surface temperatures after it went through the Marianas, and I thought the same thing you did, Devin. I mean, I saw those 29, 30 degree Celsius temps. I'm thinking this thing's going to blow right back up. And
just never did.
No, and that's probably the big saving grace for Luzon is the fact that it never really got itself reorganized and got itself structurally sound again to where it could make another run back up towards the higher intensities.
I was skeptical because it said when it was a Category 5 that wind shear was going to be on the up, but it wasn't wind shear at all. It was the storm being its own worst enemy.
That's pretty much what's going on here.
Yeah.
All right, so
that's Orlando. He's just joined us, I think.
Yeah, I just arrived.
What's your take on Typhoon Yutu at this point?
Well, right now, as it's like approaching landfall, as we speak, it's quite surprising its development from being rapidly intensified, Category 5, and then it declined. And I wasn't expecting such a significant decline, and then now it's starting to reorganize right as it approaches landfall, which is not good.
The eye emerging just a little bit more in those latest frames, but I suggest that's probably superficial on the looks of things. It certainly had a bit of an advance in its movement earlier on, which made me wonder whether it was going to make landfall sort of like now or within an hour or something. But it looks to me now it's slowed down a little more again. We might be looking at about 4:30 in the morning for landfall.
that's what landfall is looking like, is somewhere around 4 o'clock.
And that is not really a good time considering it is still dark in the Philippines at that time. They'll be seeing the worst of the conditions hit their areas during the early morning hours into the daylight hours, which is a little bit of a saving grace, but still they got those 2-3 hours before sunrise when this stuff is going through, and that is just a very dangerous time. If anybody is crazy enough to be out on the road at that hour, they need to find shelter now.
Oh.
At the bottom of the screen we're showing all of the locations, all of the provinces in Luzon going by, showing you what the warnings are and how much rainfall to expect in all of these areas. If you've got any more questions or comments for us whilst we're on the air, we're here right now to answer your questions. Start your message with Force 13 all in text on the YouTube chat, or you can contact us through Facebook and Twitter.
All right, I'm just scrolling through right now. Gonna see what I can pick out here. Any danger for China/Taiwan after it crosses the archipelago? I imagine he means crossing the Philippines there. And I would say, yeah, all interests along the South China Sea, bordering areas of China, as well as the entire island of Taiwan, should continue to monitor this situation as Typhoon Yutu, Philippine name Rosita, ends up moving into the South China Sea. And it is expected to stall after around 3 days, and the confidence of the forecast becomes very, very weak after that. So we really don't know where this storm's going to be going after 3 days. Yes, storm surge. I was actually about to say that storm surge is expected to get up to 3 meters over the coastal areas of Isabela, Cagayan, Aurora, Ilocos Sur, Ilocos Norte, La Union, and Pangasinan.
And this is, I'm not sure if you've seen it, Devin, but I know we're putting them at the bottom of our screen. But this is the general map layout of where all the signal warnings are. A lot of the signal 3s in central Luzon, the signal 1s down in and around the Manila metro area, and there are some severe flooding warnings up as well.
And we have our own graphic that we're continuing to annotate time and again as well, showing the 2 a.m. position. The darker orange there showing the signal 3s, the lighter shade signal 2s, and the lightest of them all signal 1s and where we think the highest amount of rain will fall. We just threw that together literally, so quite a few things to be looking at. I'd also like to announce, just somewhat speculative maybe, but the wind speed probabilities for those locations external to the Philippines. So Hong Kong is currently at about 38%, Macau at about 30%, the coast of Taiwan, Kaohsiung, is still at about 16 or 17% there. Shantou in China, that is probably the highest of all of them right now, 41%. I don't actually have any other locations at hand here, but a lot of other locations in China to be watching for the storm. The eastern tip of Hainan is still in there at 7% as well. Taipei, it is only about 4% there. And actually Manila, for tropical storm conditions, at about 20%, so looks like chances are falling there. I wouldn't be so sure. It's going to be a pretty close one. There's a steep gradient as you head north.
There is the latest loop on the Himari 8. Still showing that dry air, still trying to entrench in on the western and northwestern side. And it does look like the last few frames that the storm has been able to try to reestablish that northwestern eye wall and trying to close off the dry air there.
I really don't think so. Just about make out the outline of the land area there. The inner eye wall, in inverted commas, still off the coast at this time.
Just to give people an idea, this is the north central part of Luzon, where my cursor is actually outline it here in the yellow. That's the whole north central part there, Luzon, where we are expecting the worst conditions to hit. This is also the area through here where those signal 3 warnings are in effect in that area.
Someone has just asked, how big is the wind field? And the JMA says that the wind field extends out 440 kilometers or 240 nautical miles to the north and west of the storm, and 330 kilometers or 180 nautical miles to the south and east of the storm.
And the JTWC says 150 nautical miles of tropical storm force winds in both northern quadrants. That would be somewhere near 300 kilometers.
And that is the latest Himari image as of 19 minutes ago. See what looks like the western edge of the worst conditions starting to come on shore. The eye still... Well, this looks like it's still maybe 60 or 70 miles offshore by the Himari image, but I'm pretty sure that the eye is a lot closer than that at this point.
Yes, I can tell you as of half an hour ago, the latest distance from landfall now stands at... Just trying to find out. Eager to know as much as anyone else. 28 miles. So that's actually ahead of schedule, isn't it? A little bit.
28 miles from the coastline would put it... Let's see here. That's 18. That's 21. Right about there on the Google Earth world map.
Well, I have it at... It'll make it easier for you, actually. You can search coordinates in that, can't you?
Yeah, I actually have the coordinates right down at the very bottom of my screen there.
I have it at 16.75, 122.86.
Okay, 16.75, 122.86.
Right a little more. More. A little more, about there.
Probably 50. So right about there is where it's at. That puts it, let's see here. About 28, 29 miles to the coastline. That's about right.
Yeah, the shortest straight line is actually a little bit further north than that, so that's why we get 28.
Oh yeah, it's probably right up here.
But there we are. That's where we're at the minute.
The,
But yeah, assuming it goes due west, which is what it's been doing so far, it's got another 30 miles. Devon?
The JMA has just put out their latest forecast and now expect dissipation of Typhoon Yutu after 3 days.
After 3 days.
This is their 5-day cone. As you can see, there's only 3 days.
Wow.
That's a little surprising.
You sure?
The JMA. Yeah, the JMA
dramatic change.
The JMA does expect the storm to weaken to 985 millibars after crossing Luzon, maintain intensity for the next day, and then down to 990 on the final circle there, and it doesn't go beyond that.
Maybe just because they don't know. They don't want to guess. But yes, they do expect...
That's very much could be the case because it is very...
they do expect the storm
cone
to lose typhoon status in just 12 hours. I just don't see it.
Oh, never mind. Now they just put out the next 2 days.
Oh.
So they put out the 3 days, and now they have just put out the 5-day cone, where they currently describe the direction and speed of movement as north slow and northeast slow.
Yeah, I could have told you that.
They don't have the big graphic up yet, but they do have the 5-day cone on the small graphic.
What intensity were they expecting at the end of that period?
Well, the last one that they have is at the end of 3 days, which is 990 millibars.
Oh, they don't have an intensity prediction.
They do not have an intensity prediction for days 4 and 5.
Okay. Well, there we are.
Well, assuming that it actually takes that path, which we know on any kind of cone, there is that margin of error. It could be looking to possibly hit the coastline between Hong Kong on up to cities like Shantou and Guangzhou on the southeastern side of China there.
Or it may do none of the above and stall and turn south.
Yeah, that's actually what I was about to say, is that the center of the cone does not actually go over land, though a large part of the cone is over a very good chunk of the southeastern China coast and inland. Also encompasses almost all of Taiwan, a lot of the southwestern portion, and the cone almost encompasses northwestern Luzon at 5 days.
Oh no.
Which is why we have always stated that these cones are informational purposes only, and the further out the forecast goes, the lower the confidence on where it could actually be inside those cones.
We just got a new position update from 17 minutes ago. The storm is now 24 miles from landfall.
Yeah. Okay, so I now have the latest 5-day cone all updated on the screen now.
So that's the latest from the Japanese Meteorological Agency. And it's quite a big cone extending from northern Taiwan almost as far as Hainan.
Yeah, pretty much. And again, it should be stressed that this is a pretty low confidence forecast. So the size of that 5-day cone is certainly justified.
We're just about to finish up this hour of coverage, and we'll be back with another hour afterwards. So I don't know if any of you guys want to bring anything to our attention before we finish up the hour.
Nothing at the moment. I'm just trying to keep an eye on if there's any new information that does pop up so we can get it out to the viewers in a timely manner.
Back to the latest imagery of the storm, which looks like this. You can see its movement in the last few frames. Maybe slight northward element in that movement.
No.
No, I'm not seeing it either. Maybe a slight wobble, but it's definitely still looking like it's maintaining that westward movement.
I don't mean
over the last
north,
few
I mean
frames.
just a tiny bit north of west. Heading 275 or something like that.
It's possible, but it's really hard to make that determination with just what little bit of imagery that we have available.
So in summary, this storm is now down to 24 miles from landfall. It's likely to deliver serious amounts of rainfall to the central part of Luzon, along with winds of over 160 kilometers per hour with higher gusts. And Devon thinks it's a category 3. You still think that?
Borderline category 2, category 3, somewhere in there.
I don't think that's a outlandish statement to make at all. And I imagine that the ATCF information will be updating soon if they haven't already. They have. They've kept it at 105 miles per hour, and for your information, Hurricane Oscar in the Atlantic is up to 90 miles per hour on the ATCF. We'll wait and see whether the National Hurricane Center confirm that in
You're joking.
a few hours.
You're absolutely kidding.
Oh boy. Devon's not going to be happy about that one.
No, I'm not happy about that. That is... must be a Halloween prank.
Well, considering there was a debate on the server when it was just barely reaching hurricane status, if it was actually 60 or 70.
Well, I will say right now that it looks terrible on satellite.
I honestly have not had a look at it. I'll probably
I'm
take a
not
glance
going to
at it when
look.
we go to break.
I did have a quick look earlier actually. It doesn't look too bad. Maybe 90 miles an hour, pushing it for Hurricane Oscar. But the main feature today, this morning, the early hours of this morning in the Philippines, it's Typhoon Yutu. The Philippine name is Rosita, of course. We'll have another hour of coverage, and by the rate of movement at the minute, it looks like landfall could happen just towards the end of this coming hour. Stay tuned, we've got a lot to cover, and we'll be back with you in about 5 minutes.
continues in a moment. You can follow Force 13's outlets, the website, force13.com, our YouTube page, youtube.com/Force13, on Facebook under the same name, Force13, and our Twitter handle, it's @Force13 if you wish to get in touch. You can also add Force13 on Skype, and my personal account on Discord, Fool13, at extension 9094. You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. So the miles tick away until the landfall from Typhoon Yutu, the Philippine name being Rosita, of course. Hopefully the storm will not prolong itself and we'll be able to wash our hands of it as soon as possible, because we don't really want to deal with another storm for the Philippines, but I'm afraid that's what we've got in front of us right now. And it is about to make landfall. It could happen in this hour, but we'll wait and see on that. It's going to be a close one. 24 miles to go. My name's Nathan Foy. I'm joined by our team in this hour, consisting of Tim, Orlando, and Devon.
Yep.
Who'd like to begin on this one?
Well, I will begin here with the information out of Pagasa, issued at 2 a.m. and their advisory says that Typhoon Rosita Yutu maintains its strength and continues to pose a serious threat over southern Isabela province. The expected landfall timing of